Hello, welcome, ladies and gentlemen of all genders. My name is Johannes Grenzfurtner. I'm an artist and filmmaker based in Vienna, Austria. I founded Monochrome, an art collective, some 30 years ago. I just recently premiered a new horror film at Fantastic Fest in Austin, Texas. But that's enough talking about me, because you're not here because of me. You're here because we have wonderful guests, Helena Mackenzie and Jordan McGarry, both representatives of Film London. And I'm, of course, super excited about that. The B3, the Biennial of the Moving Image, is, of course, dealing with all kinds of media, not only movies, but also, you know, like 360-degree films, virtual reality, all kinds of stuff, interactive art. But today we want to focus on film and film production. And of course, both of you are just like excellent talking partners to talk about the topic of take a chance. So this talk is something for talented, creative, and visionary people out there who are hopefully watching. And so we just want, first of all, let's start for all the people who don't know what Film London is. What is Film London? So I don't know who of you wants to start. Maybe Helena.
Helena, this is for you.
Oh, God. Yeah.
I guess that's because I've been at Film London the longest. So it's just, if I don't know what it is by now, then we're all in trouble, right? So Film London is actually a screen agency in London for the Mayor of London. It's partly financed by the Mayor of London, and we work across all kind of anything with a screen, basically. So whether it's a big screen in terms of cinema, smaller screen in terms of television, or even tiny little screens, you know. So basically we encourage productions, we nurture productions and producers, we put people together, we facilitate, we want to see things happen. We want to keep the wheels of production turning and greased and oiled, so that actually the creatives can go out and do what they do best, but with the help and support of Film London, which could be many things. So it's production attraction, it's production nurturing, and also about distribution and how to get films sold internationally and distributed internationally, as well as distributed domestically as well. So lots of things.
Lots of things. Maybe my question for Jordan. Is there something comparable to Film London in other countries? Because like what I hear like out of your description, Helena, is that I haven't really heard about similar things in other, like you have such a big scope of trying to facilitate things. In other countries, it's usually you have the Film Institute and you have like a couple of local small film grants, and then you have the production companies, but they're all kind of like scattered all around the place.
Yeah, I think so. I think everything that we do exists elsewhere, but I don't know how many other companies or organizations do it all under one roof. And Helena hasn't even listed everything. We also have Games London, which is a sister company, but it's part of the same thing. We have Screen Heritage, so there's London Screen Archives. It's really, it's kind of mind-boggling when you think about how much we get done and how much we do. And we're quite a small team. There's about 50 people in total.
There's also a commission as well with the commission services, locations and stuff like that. So yeah, for a small team, we punch quite high above our weight, I think, as that phrase is.
Yeah. We have two things that we're especially sort of excited to talk to you guys about. One, and they're kind of related, one is happening right now. So your people who are watching this will have missed it, but you know, we're interested for you next year. Is the production finance market, which is supporting people who are trying to finance feature films. It's kind of like speed dating for filmmakers and financiers. So I'm afraid you've missed the boat on that one this year, but look out, next May we'll open again. It's open for international projects too. And also we have a project called UPstream, which is related to PFM because it's similar. It's the people who are looking to create projects, make projects that is based in IP, early stage IP, rather than sort of developed feature film scripts. So that's kind of our big thing that we're keen to talk to you guys about.
And there's lots else going on as well. So yeah, let's.
Well, that all sounds great. Like for me as a representative of B3 here, and also I'm a filmmaker, so like all of that stuff is very, very, very interesting to me personally. So I'll definitely pick your brains a little bit longer. Okay, so first of all, because I mean that's a question like on everyone's mind right now. How did Film London deal with all the craziness of the last year and a half and COVID? So like, so how like, what was your emergency plan, let's call it, or how did you deal with the situation?
We had what I called a COBRA meeting, which is kind of like it's a government term when they're having a very serious meeting in Parliament or in Downing Street. It's called a COBRA meeting. So we had one of those basically, and we closed the office on something like the 16th of March or something in 2020. And we all said that, you know, we would all go home and that we would work from home. And I'd never heard of Zoom before. Suddenly Zoom became my lifeline. I mean, not only work-wise, but also in your personal life as well. We all said, see you in 3 months. And when we'll be back in the office again. And of course, that hasn't happened. So but everything went onto a Zoom or a Teams type platform. And actually, we all got on with it pretty quickly and pretty well. And it's actually worked much better than I think any of us ever expected, to be honest.
Yeah, I think a lot of our work, obviously the filmmakers that we support were terribly affected sometimes, whether they were trying to get into production and their production got halted, or whether they were trying to release films and their film release plans got put into chaos. But a lot of the work that we do translated to Zoom very well. So we have Film London Labs where we support and develop filmmakers and help them with their projects. That all took place on Zoom very effortlessly. Our production finance market moved to a digital platform, and that actually worked really well. Our events became, more accessible and easier to get to, both for people who maybe have disability or for people who are further away. So we have more people taking part, which actually was great, although obviously we missed the sort of personal face-to-face. But then underneath that, I think my team was fairly, things were quite straightforward. Our work all just moved online. But Adrian Wooten, our CEO, and Helena's team, and Paul Bowman, our colleague who looks after exhibition, all had to sort of scramble to figure out what they could put in place to help get production back up and running, get cinemas reopening, support people who were in crisis. So there was another sort of layer of work that went on underneath everything. And they did an amazing job, actually. I think that's something that people keep talking about, how quickly London and the UK got back on its feet.
It was an extraordinary feat, really, because we got all the organizations that are involved in film production or film and television production, so that's in various unions and associations and guilds and everything, plus the creatives themselves that are higher level creatives, to sit down on a Zoom and work out a kind of best practice on how they were going to get the studios back open again and get the cameras turning and production underway. And it took also working with the government and also working with NHS and all the health and safety guidelines and everything. So putting that together would, under not any other circumstances, would probably take, probably about a year or two or something to kind of like get all of that kind of bureaucracy done. We did it in a few months, like 3 months. So we closed the office down in the middle of March, but the first studio door opened for production on the 4th of July.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it was interesting to see, like, but pretty much like all over the planet, but of course, obviously the same, I guess, in the UK, that some filmmakers were very happy because they kind of like finished their production and then they had a lot of time in post-production. I hear a lot of stories of like, oh, it was a good thing that I had like another year to edit the film or do post-production, something like that. But then again, the problem was like, how do we release it? Like all filmmakers want the premiere, a proper premiere, and not a virtual premiere, and that was all a little bit like. Could you share, Emily, some stories, like some good or bad stories about filmmakers
I tell you
that
what,
you deal with, like dealt with that?
I think on the development front, and this is interesting for what's happening with us right now with our production finance market, which is happening currently as we speak, was that the quality of the projects that we got in last year really went up a level or two, I would say, because actually it meant that the producers, the creators involved in their projects had more time to actually spend to develop those projects rather than trying to get them out as as quickly as possible. So that was a significant change we found, didn't we, Jordan? That it was just the quality of the projects was just much of a much higher standard. So that was a positive for sure.
Yeah, and we had a couple of films coming out last year. So we have a scheme called Microwave, which is first feature scheme, very low budgets, but some really wonderful films, wonderful teams making some great films. And two of them were planned to be released last year, and their release plans got, they weren't cancelled, but they just had to sort of pivot and evolve very quickly. And obviously, it's hugely disappointing for people not to have the theatrical run they were hoping for. But on the flip side, because there weren't very many films being released last year, even though they had a couple of small scale sort of theatrical screenings, and then they went online to platforms, and actually they got tons of press because there weren't that many films being released. The sort of field was a bit clearer. So I'm not saying that replaced the idea of having a theatrical screening, but people were incredibly creative. Our funders were incredibly supportive. The BFI allowed those pivots to happen and to support people in what they were trying to do to be creative and get things out in the world in fresh ways. So it was difficult, but as ever, creative people are very creative and find good solutions around problems.
Absolutely. But okay, let's stop talking about COVID. Like everyone talks about COVID all the time anyway. So let's get into let's imagine there is a filmmaker out there. And so first of all, we are in a time where there is an obvious democratization of filmmaking, because we all have a 4K camera in our pockets, and people can easily just start shooting a film, doing something. Most of the time, the problem is not the technical part, and it's also not the problem of that people are not creative. They might even have their home studio or home audio studio and all that gear, but getting that film out to someone or finding a producer, maybe some people even have a finished product, but they don't know what to do with it. So how are you tackling the problem of that there are so many cool creative filmmakers, media creators out there, and they have no idea how the actual, let's call it the film market or the commercial side of dealing with film works?
Yeah, we have actually a ton of stuff. So my department is talent development and production, and this is what we think about and do all day long, every day. We have various strands of activity depending on what level people are at. And actually, currently, this is one of the silver linings of COVID, not to bring back that word, but it's everything we do is accessible wherever you are in the world at the moment. And I think we will maintain elements of that even as the pandemic finishes. We are the London partner of BFI Network. And that's the British Film Institute's sort of program for new and emerging filmmakers. So we fund short films and early development of feature film concepts for the BFI. We run tons of masterclasses and talks and sessions and labs for short filmmakers who are at the very beginning of trying to figure out who they are, what stories they want to tell, and how to go about that, how to get their short films out into the world. And that's a really great program. We have some really amazing filmmakers coming through every year, and those guys come back and sort of speak to our filmmakers and mentor and sort of pay it forward for the next generation. Beyond that, once you've made your short films and you're thinking about features, we have a series called Film London Labs, which is exactly that, to sort of bridge people from short films into long form, mostly features, but we also sort of dabble in television and interactive entertainment every now and then. And once you've written your feature film script, then you can come to the production finance market, which is the market that's happening right now. My strand of the market is for new talent. So we're everything budgeted under 1 million euros, and people generally directors on their first, possibly second feature. And then once you graduate from the new talent strand, you go over to Helena's side of the market, which is for everyone above that, more experienced and higher budgets. And beyond that, Helena, over to you. You have programs that take people out into the world once they've made their film.
Yeah, I mean, we do other things like once the film has been made, I run something called the London Screenings, where we bring over, about 100 international film distributors over to London for 4 days, and we take over a cinema and we show them sort of all the new independent British films that have been made in that last year. So it's a very focused event. It means it all happens in one cinema, so they don't have to, like at a film festival or a market or something, they're running around up and down the Croisette or going over to Berlin, one side of Berlin to see a film, and then they happen to go to the other side of Berlin to see another, to go to another cinema. It all happens in one cinema and over 4 days, so they get everything that they want in that one place. And I kind of don't let them go back to their territories until they've bought a British film, basically. So so that's what we do when they're finished. So there's actually, I kind of call it the circle of life within Film London. You know, there's lots of things that you can do from the very, very beginning, and UPstream, which is our IP event, which we can talk about, you know, from a nugget of an idea right through to production, you know, production in London and financing and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't even have to be production in London, but through production into distribution and exhibition. So, you know, you can, if you understand how Film London works, there's so much you can get from it. And because we are publicly funded and we are actually a charity, a lot of the stuff we do is either free or minimal cost.
Wow. So in Austria, and of course all this like film grants and all this stuff is different. In Austria, I see like an interesting problem, because I also talk to many filmmakers, colleagues of mine, and in Austria it is kind of easy to get a super small like film art grant, like I don't know, like something in the range of like up to 15k euros or 20k euros, something like that. And then there's almost nothing until the Austrian Film Institute jumps in, and then you're at 500,000 and 1 million euros. And there's kind of like nothing in between, that what like in a classic way in the US would be called indie film, where you want to make a feature film for like 250k or something like that. Is there something like that possible in the UK? Or like how in general, how does the funding system work?
Well, generally, we are, I would say, kind of the nursery slopes. People sort of cut their teeth and make their short films or first features with us. And hopefully that work gets the attention of the big public funders here. So that would be British Film Institute, Film 4, BBC Film. And that's generally where people go to after they've come through the early stages of working with Film London. So that happens a lot. And even now, increasingly, it's not necessarily just about features. People go on and they get into BBC, they're making drama for BBC One, they're going off to work with Netflix. So it's film and TV. So that's not something that happens always under the roof of Film London. I wish we had a second feature scheme, but we don't currently. But we do have quite a sort of well-trodden path from us to the BFI, BBC and Film 4 and TV.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, I think it is a
international funder.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a struggle when people have made their first film. Hopefully everything goes brilliantly and they get to make a second film. But, you know, the public funders only have so much bandwidth and so much budget each year. So that is something that we would love to solve. I don't have an answer for it yet, but helping people make that second feature.
But also some of the regions around the country will have their own funds, that if you're going to shoot in Scotland or if you're going to shoot in Liverpool or something, there may be a local fund that you can get. But that's the idea of the production finance market, is to put you in front of financiers. It's not a co-production market, it's actually a finance market. So you'll be coming to the market with some money already attached, which could be the tax credit, but and that's fine. But you're going to be meeting different types of financiers at the finance market who will, you know, probably put in maybe they'll put in another 10-20% or something, which is then going to take your project to maybe 50-60% finance now, you know, which is, so all the time it's moving forward and it's becoming a more of an attractive option for somebody else to get involved. It's building blocks all the way.
Okay, just for the people who don't know the difference, a co-production market pretty much means you have a producing company, you have a producer, and you're trying, for example, you're in Austria and you're trying to get like additional funding, and you, for example, you try to find like a co-production company, let's say in France or in the UK or something like that, and then you go to a co-production market.
Yeah, I mean, it's also sort of, yes, absolutely. but you're not going to go for it. If you're going to shoot in Austria or something, whether you're going to need to find a co-producer in Austria to be able to enable you to shoot, because they know how to shoot in Austria better than anybody else does. So you're going to want somebody on the ground that understands the landscape and the companies to go to and everything. So there's that side of it as well. So but yeah, a co-production market is really you're finding your co-producing partner, as in a person or a company, whereas the production finance market is literally about the cash.
Good.
Yeah.
It's very straightforward. I like it.
but it can also be international sales, it can be distribution, but all of these elements are great for the project, and just they make it more attractive. It becomes something that's credible because you've got people attached to it. So again, it's just making your offer more and more doable and attractive as it goes along.
And it's a really useful experience for producers, particularly on my side where they're new talent and they may not have lots of relationships and connections in the industry yet. You have a day of meetings where you might meet 8, 10, however many potential partners for your film. And even if they're not the right person for this film, lots of the feedback that we get suggests that, the following film and the film after that, you still have those relationships with the people that you met at PFM. You can go back to them, having spent the day listening to them and hearing about what they're interested in. And it's useful for your projects and your career going forwards.
Let's tell me a little bit about a couple of let's call it the classic success stories of Film London, of some projects you're incredibly proud of, or like in whatever circumstance, maybe even during COVID, if we want to go back to that, but just like some stories, because I really would like also our listeners to get something. They might even have heard of some of the projects that you supported and stuff like that. So it's always good to get like some like ideas of what you started or what you supported and where it went.
Sure. Well, at the moment, the one that everybody's talking about is Censor, which is Prano Bailey Bond's debut feature, and that came to our PFM in 2017. Obviously, it was released this year, and the team has done a case study for us that's being shown at PFM this week. It's actually going to go up on the Film London website soon, so if people want to watch that and hear the teams talking about their experience financing that film, that will be available on the Film London website next week. But there are so many. I mean, we've had lots of filmmakers come up who have gone on to wonderful things recently. Kate Herron was a director who came through our microwave slate I want to say 4 years ago. She developed a feature with us that actually we didn't finance in the end, but she went on and did sex education for Netflix. Loki for cool. Disney. And she has lots of features in development now. There are so many, I don't know where to start with filmmakers from my side. Helena, I'm going to throw this one over to you so I can have a think.
The funny thing is that with us on the main part of PFM, the main strand, it's actually more difficult than it is on Jordan strand, because you're dealing with much more bigger budgets, and it's kind of so it's like with Jordan's team and Jordan's side of things on the new talent, normally the effect is fairly immediate. I mean, it's really it's much quicker. Whereas if you're dealing with something that's got somewhere between $5 to $25 million budget or euro budget, it just takes longer. But off the top of my head, there's a ton of European projects that actually have come through because it's a very international event. So with a ton of European projects have gone on to be made, and absolutely with the UK as well. Put me on the spot.
Sorry.
I'll come back to you on that one. But the thing is that the producers come back every year, or certainly apply every year, and the financiers come back every year. Mm-hmm. So they wouldn't be coming back if they weren't getting something from it. Mm-hmm. So it's got a good return rate.
Mm-hmm.
No, wonderful. But what I'm very interested in is like. So how long does Film London exist? So when was it founded, so to speak?
2004.
Oh, 4. Yes, okay. So that's a long time ago, but also not that long a time ago.
It was something that was set up when there used to be the national body was called the UK Film Council, and what they were doing was to basically have these screen agencies around the country, and they kind of left London to last, to be honest. So when they set it up, they appointed Adrian Wotton as the chief executive, and basically what they did with London, because London had lots of small little organisations and associations that were dealing all in across all different types of media, but within the film and television industries, and so they all came under one roof and basically became Film London. So we had people that were working in video, we had people that were working in artist movement, we had people that were working in distribution, the London Film Commission, and it all came under the Film London banner. So we still have some of those operations, if you like, but they're all under, and they're all basically the different departments in some ways of Film London. So yes, we have been going since 2004, and I was there pretty much at the beginning, and it was a much smaller team, probably maybe 20 people, maybe 15 20 people, and now there's about 50 of us. So it has grown. We do an awful lot of work, so it has grown.
And what was the political thinking was to kind of really like combine those different organizations into one house?
Yeah, I mean, it's just because it was too disparate, around the capital, really, and it's just kind of let's have everyone in the same home. Also, it's sort of easier to fund, rather than the Film Council sort of giving, 50 grand over there or 10 grand over there to do this, and it's kind of like it just makes it easier for them from a funder's point of view, but also from and the outsider looking in. So the people that are going to be using us just know that it's a one-stop shop. That they don't have to shop their project around town. They just come to us, and between us, hopefully between all the different departments, we can hopefully help them.
It's definitely more streamlined that way, I guess, if it's all in-house, so to speak. Yeah,
it is. And also one of the reasons that London has grown is because the industry has changed. The landscape is changing all the time. And so, whilst obviously there is still very much traditional filmmaking, in every way, that sense of traditional filmmaking, but now there's new ways of doing things, and we've had to adapt and everything as well. We have to move forward. And in fact, in some ways, we have to be in front of the curve and certainly not at the back end of it, which is why we run UPstream now, which is our IP market. And, because we're looking to, people are making films in different ways. So we've got to be able to try and find the content that people can then either develop or nurture into film and television projects. So, we're having to do things slightly differently as well. So it's a shape-shifting industry. It's never the same.
It's funny, we talk about this quite a lot because our name, obviously, Film London, gives people an impression that we just deal with feature films. But actually, as Helena says, the industry has changed so much in the last 5 years, let alone the last 10, 15 years, that we're having to, whatever you're trying to make, if it belongs on a screen, then we're here to help you, and we have to help people navigate that, especially, it's not especially from my point of view, I think this goes for everybody, but, if we are encouraging new talent to come into the industry, we want them to have as sustainable a career as possible and have as broad a horizon as possible, so they have, the ability to navigate that landscape that's changing, and we're sort of future-proofing people's skills and their careers, so that they can, you might think that you're going to be a filmmaker, but you might end up making something for TV. You might end up working in games or whatever. And, the skills are very transferable, and IP is very transferable. So, why not? We have to figure out how to help people do all of that stuff. Whether we're going to change our name or not, I don't know. It seems like too big a conversation to have. But for now, it's Film London.
Yeah. Good point that the media landscape is so changing, and of course, like what young people are interested and young filmmakers are interested in is constantly changing. I mean, there are young people who don't watch TV anymore; they just watch YouTube, and of course that also changes aesthetics and all that kind of stuff. So, a question for you, Jordan, because you're dealing a lot of the time with like developing new talent. So, is there something? I mean, I wouldn't like ask for a percentage or something like that, but what are young people really interested in? Are they more interested in doing interactive stuff? Are they more interested in doing like regular classic films, short films? What is there something like can you wither something emergent? Let's call it that way.
Well, I think there are two things happening, which one is undeniable, that there are still like so many people who grow up wanting to make work that belongs on a cinema screen. In the same way that there are still, the primary audience we have in mind is people who want to go and experience film collectively like that, when they watch together and you all jump at the same time, you all laugh at the same time. That is like just a magical experience that not only, we all love being in the audience, but lots of people still have that as their chief ambition. However, there's also the reality that there's, as you say, we all have a 4K camera in our pocket. There's work that you can put online. And actually my previous job before I came to Film London was working for an internet platform, video sharing platform. So I'm very, very aware of all of that world and how great that opportunity is for people to come up. Lots of the filmmakers that we fund short films from have come up through, making shorts and sort of experimenting, finding their network, finding their collaborators and their voice through making that kind of very experimental personal short films. And that really helps, because then, if we're going to give you money to make the film that we hope catapults you up to the next level, it helps if you've sort of played around and sort of experimented a bit and figured out what you want to do before you get sort of put in front of the industry in that way. But ultimately, I think, if you're intending to set yourself up as a filmmaker or a storyteller, ultimately you want to make a living doing the thing that you love. So you have to be open to whatever the possibilities are that come your way. This year you might be making a feature film. Next year you might be doing a series for Netflix. One day you might be making an interactive project, like a Bandersnatch or some sort of game that belongs on a console. And really our job is to help you prepare for that, whatever you want to do. I think it's not the case anymore that it's like separate tracks for people, that you're either a filmmaker or you work in TV, or you work in games. I think the future is going to be very flexible, and people should be able to switch between the two, depending on, what works for the story they're telling and what works for their, the people that they've met. So, I think this is a fuzzy answer, but it's the truth. I think things are a lot more blurry than they used to be, and I think that's really exciting.
Mm-hmm. You want to add something, Helena?
Well, I was actually going to say the same thing. It says that, back in the day, it used to be somebody was a film producer or somebody was a television producer, and now they're not, they're just a producer. And that's a good thing. And I don't mean that, I hate the word content actually, because they kind of, that sounds just too pedestrian. But they are content creators, and they're producing materials that in some way, shape or form, we're going to watch or use or experience in some way. So I think, people are just producers these days, and they have to be flexible in what they're going to produce. I think they are. Their minds have been opened a lot more. And similarly with those people who are either buying that or distributing that, have also become a lot more open-minded about things. So I think this makes for a very exciting playground. I think it's tremendously exciting, and there's so many outlets now, where there never used to be. When I first started out, back in the 1800s, it was, I mean, there was just really, really traditional stuff, and now there's so much out there for so many people, and I think that it's very, very exciting.
And I mean, from what I can see from a distance, is that I hear so many cool, innovative projects coming out of the UK, like in general. Like most of the time, now that I know that something like Film London exists, I might may pay more attention to where exactly the project comes from. But it seems that the UK is in general very innovative with TV formats. I mean, you like all the good stuff that you guys produce, like all copied by the Americans.
Right.
There's so many examples for that, and Yeah.
I always used to think that the UK was an especially creative country, particularly, you know, when you can the sort of, you know, everyone thinks about Hollywood and America as being the big industry, but actually we punch above our weight. And I think it's because we have such a terrible climate. I think people, you know, when it's raining, you can't go to the beach. So you stay inside and you write a book, or you know, write an album, or you make a movie, or you write a story. So yeah, I think we've just, there's no beaches, there's no, you know, sunshine and baseball here. Everybody's at home trying to make something and get something done.
Yeah, I had always, like, I don't know why, but there were so many extremely successful films in the last 20, 25 years. And they were all post-apocalyptic, you know, like Children of Man, I don't know, like 28 Days Later, all that stuff. Like, and when I came to the UK the next time, I thought, like, I'm in this like hellscape where the zombies are jumping out every corner. I don't know, but
well, I have to
anyhow,
say, when we went on lockdown, the very first lockdown, actually, it was a bit like 28 Days Later in London, because there was nobody around, and it was so strange. But
yeah, so weird. It's also funny because it's been such a dark few years, you know, not just the pandemic, but even before then, there's so much going on in the world that was so hard for everybody. And we really saw that, you know, we saw the sort of identity crisis and turmoil from Brexit coming out in people's creative work. You know, you see people responding, particularly in short films where the turnaround is quicker. The applications we were getting, and even through PFM, you know, people writing, sort of, you could see it coming out in people's work. Now I think especially in the last year, things got so difficult. Everyone's just desperate for escapism and, you know, something a bit more cheerful and uplifting. So I'm predicting there's going to be a bit of a change of tone in the work that we're coming out. And maybe in a few years' time, people will have processed COVID and pandemic to respond to it in a different way.
That will take some time. I think it's interesting to see, because people are asking, why are there not more COVID films coming out? But we were not even through it yet. Come on.
Yeah, like, it's the last thing you want now.
The young, you know, like the young kids who had to suffer through this, like when they were 10 or something like that, they will make films about that in 10 years. Like we can't even like know what this will make. So, but good point. Brexit. First of all, my condolences, and second, so how did Brexit kind of like interfere with what you guys are doing? Maybe Helena.
Yeah, I mean, it is the kind of the B word. I mean, it's just like, oh God. I mean, we're so tired of it, really, but it's only just happened. But it's, for us, it's been like years in the negotiation. It's all gonna it still needs to land properly, and still it's very, very grey areas. But you know, from our point of view, and actually from a sort of continental Europe part of view, there is still the will and desire to work with each other, and weirdly, more so than ever, it's almost like in defiance of this. You know, it's kind of like where, you know, there will be some international or European agreements that are going to be announced in the next couple of months, actually, but with Film London and the British Film Commission, about working with other European territories and making sure that this doesn't stop the storytelling that should absolutely continue. And there's so many rich streams of stories out there that need to be told, and I'm sure will be told. We talked about producers solving problems. That's what will happen ultimately at the end of the day. This is that there's some bureaucratic hurdles that have been thrown in between us now. But I believe wholeheartedly, because of the desire and the will to get it done, we will get over them, and we'll get there in the end. But it's a headache nobody wanted, and we're absolutely, you know, we're not happy about it at all. But we are where we are, and we've got to make it work. And I believe we will.
Yeah, absolutely. I think British people are quite stubborn like that. They want to do something. Creative people, especially, you know, people want to do something. They want to tell a story. They want to make a film. They just find a way. So, as Helena says, there are annoying hurdles in the way that we weren't necessarily used to, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, creative people are used to bureaucratic hurdles. I mean, all the time. I mean, it's so weird that there is maybe that's a question even, especially like in art schools and film schools. I have the feeling that there should be way more emphasis on the production side of things. I think like in film schools, it is probably a little bit better, but in art schools, and I have many friends who are like doing video art and that kind of stuff and short films, like they never had a single class in art school about like how to actually find someone, like find money, like how. And I'm not sure, is this like different in the UK, or do you see there is also like a deficit? I'm not sure. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's lots of there are lots of universities that have sort of more business side, courses and everything. You know, MBAs in marketing and distribution or financing and stuff like that. But you know, so they do have them. It's not all about the physical production. So there are and there are more courses that will come up. We have a massive remit for skills in London across the whole of the production arena, actually. I mean, from camera operators to production accountants to all sorts of things, because of, you know, the amount of production that happens in London at the moment. We have to plug those skills gaps. But there are courses, but I think that we need more. And, you know, it's not just when you want to work in the film industry, you don't just want to work in production. There's so many other sides to it. So there are courses that people can do. Mm-hmm. Jordan, anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say that we're quite fortunate that there is quite a long pipeline. Like I said earlier, we do short films and early concept development for the British Film Institute or on behalf of the BFI, and beyond that, people go into the Central Film Fund, and into the bigger industry. But before us, there's the BFI Film Academy, which is for young people. There's BFI or Interfilm, which is supported by the BFI, which is in schools. Planting those early seeds and helping people understand what they might want to do to sort of help form the pathway to their career in film. And so, there is a long pipeline that starts like right in schools. And if people are interested, they sort of graduate from one of those steps to the next. And we're sort of in the middle as people just enter the professional game.
Yeah, and there's also we've done a lot of work in this over the last couple of years to do a lot of sort of investigating where some of where things are going wrong, and it's just kind of like because a lot of the further education, higher education, and schools were not necessarily, they may be doing courses, but they were not necessarily the courses that the industry needs. And there was a big disconnect on, the courses being done over here and the industry needs over here. So what we're in the process of doing now is making sure that they're communicating with each other and that they are actually doing the right courses that can feed straight into the industry and where they need where those gaps are, so that they can just get on with it.
Mm-hmm. Are there because that's, of course, especially in indie film in the US, a big thing is like that we are now living with kickstarting and crowdfunding now for over 10 years. It seems that especially in countries where there is public funding for arts, that stuff is a little bit lower and not so important. But are there any things that you want to share about how crowdfunding kind of changed the landscape a little bit?
I think crowdfunding is still very much in play for our short filmmakers. I think people trying to raise extra budget to augment the money that we're giving them. We often see crowdfunding kickstarts going on to sort of to give people some extra money. I would love to see more people crowdfunding features, but I just don't think it works terribly well. To raise the amounts of money people need for a feature film is really hard, but it's really useful. If you can show that you have a very engaged audience online, even if it didn't raise a huge amount of money for you, I think that can be quite useful in demonstrating to potential partners that there is an audience out there who is sort of supportive of and engaged with this film or the subject, who might be, useful to leverage later on in terms of getting the film out there. I think that the big issue, which, people crowdfunding, if they're intending to make a feature, is just be aware you don't want to promise to give away a free copy of the film. If you are trying to ask people for a tenner here or however much money, try and figure out other perks to give them, so you're not giving away a free copy to the sort of core audience who you hope might pay for your film later.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Good point. Yeah. So you see it more like like an interesting way of doing PR for your project.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, you know, it's something I'm personally very interested in, is, you know, I think filmmakers who understand the audience. I'm not saying that everybody has to be super commercial in every decision that they make, but or led by that. But, you know, if you understand your audience and how to reach them and what they're interested in and what works, it just gives you a fantastically useful string to your bow in terms of making sure that when you're talking to potential financiers or your other collaborators, you can justify yourself and your decisions, and you know it helps you, you know, in every side of your conversations. If you understand the business side, it's just enormously helpful, and it's a big part of the training and support we give to filmmakers, so that it's not just for the producer. Obviously, it's a huge thing for the producers are a huge focus in this, but you know, anyone who understands, you know, how casting might influence your film's sales potential, or what the reality of the market's like, and when might be the best time to approach people. All of those things are incredibly useful to know.
Mm-hmm. You want to add something, Helena?
No.
Good, wonderful. And we are already over like 45 minutes already. Like time flies. I would have like so many more questions, but no time. But maybe some last remarks or some last like things that you want to like shout out for projects, shout out for other organizations, maybe.
I was going to just say that, well, we are specific right now. We're in the middle of the production finance market, and which we mentioned, and we are now currently looking for early IP for UPstream, which is our IP market. But what I was going to say, really, I think that one of the best things that anyone can do is follow Film London on the various social media sites that we have. So whether it's Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, or sign up for our newsletter, because that's where you'll find all the information. It's kind of fun and interesting and everything as well. And although we are Film London, but we are such an international organization that, you know, it will do you no harm to sign up to some of the stuff that we do, because there may well be stuff that you can benefit from.
I'm a good Austrian, but I'll definitely sign up to Film London for sure.
Because things like the production finance market and UPstream, they are very, very international events, and we welcome them.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff that we're doing now, for all the obvious reasons, is available online, and anyone can join in from anywhere. As Helena says, the thing that we're sort of, once we finish PFM today, we're going to switch our attention to UPstream. UPstream is a kind of invite only, you know, it's not something that has an open application call, but there are ways and means. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find us. We have a relationship with B3 where we source IP for UPstream. So even if you're not a filmmaker, you might have a podcast, you might have a character that you've drawn, you might have a game that you've made, or a book that you've written. If you're interested in figuring out how to translate that to the screen, UPstream is for you. And, you know, wily people will find our email addresses, I'm sure.
Yes.
I don't want to give it out, but yeah.
And we'll put the main websites and social media information into the YouTube down there. And thank you so much. What a pleasure to talk to you. And have a great afternoon. And
thank you.
I'll definitely stay in contact with you, and you'll hear from me. You'll hear from B3, and thumbs up.
Thank you very much.
Okay, officially over.